When he opened his eyes, the room looked the same as it always did. The walls were painted a dull cream, the curtains half drawn, and the sunlight spilling across the floor revealed dust motes floating lazily in the air. At first, he thought it was a normal morning. He stretched his arms, letting out a long yawn, expecting the usual silence that filled the room. But something was off. The air felt heavier, thicker, like the world had shifted while he slept. He blinked once, twice, and then froze. In the corner of his room, near the window that looked out onto the quiet city street, two figures stood completely still. One was tall, regal, and unmistakably alien. Her skin shimmered with a soft silver hue, and her eyes were larger than any human eyes he had ever seen, colored like molten gold. Beside her was a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, who shared her mother's strange features but had a gentler presence. Both were looking directly at him, their gaze sharp and unyielding, as if they had been waiting for this exact moment. He tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and no sound came out. His heart raced. Every logical thought told him this couldn't be happening. Aliens were something you saw in movies or read about in books, not something that stood quietly in your bedroom. He closed his eyes and opened them again, hoping it was a dream. It was. They were still there, still staring. Finally, he managed to croak out, Who are you?" "You survived," she said simply, "and that should not have been possible." The child said nothing, simply studying him with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as if she could see everything he had ever thought. "I don't understand," he admitted. "I went asleep just like every night. Nothing happened." But even as he spoke, a strange sense of awareness began to settle over him. Something about the way the two aliens observed him made him feel like more was at stake than he realized. Elara's lips curved into a faint, almost sad smile. "You are human. That alone explains nothing. Yet humans are resilient, adaptable. You survive where others do not because you refuse to give in to your circumstances. That is why I brought you back." "Brought me back? Back from what? What are you talking about?" "And yet you are here. I wanted to see what humans are like, up close. They endure." He wanted to speak, to argue, to demand answers, but every instinct in his body told him to be silent, to listen, to absorb. There was something about these aliens that made him feel small, yet significant at the same time. His ordinary life, his mundane existence, had been erased in a single moment. Suddenly, the room shook. The floor trembled under an invisible force, and the air filled with a low hum. The princess's eyes darted toward the source, her body tensing like a coiled spring. "We don't have much time," she said. "They are coming. They know you survived. Not one that has survived the impossible. They will send soldiers, machines, sensors, anything. We must leave now. And right now, that is with us." Her touch was light but firm, and a strange warmth spread through him. "Please come with us." When he opened his eyes again, the walls of his bedroom were gone. He was no longer on Earth. The world had changed. He stood on a platform of smooth, metallic material that stretched endlessly in every direction. Above him, twin suns cast a pale orange light across the horizon, and distant stars sparkled like scattered gems. In the sky, enormous ships hovered silently, their surfaces glinting in the light. The air smelled faintly sweet, tinged with electricity. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Where are we?" he whispered. "Far from Earth," Elara said. "This is Xyler, my home planet. Here, you will be safe for now. And that is why I risked everything to save you." She paused, then gestured toward her daughter. "Lyra will help you adjust. She will teach you what you need to know, but most importantly, she will watch over you." That is how it begins. He had no weapons, no knowledge, no allies, nothing but his mind, his instincts, and the strange resilience that had kept him alive this long. He looked at the princess and her daughter. They were still watching him, their expressions calm but full of expectation. In that moment, he realized that his life had changed forever. Earth had been a small stage, a quiet existence. Now he was part of something vast, a universe that had always ignored humans until now. And he could feel it, the first glimmer of understanding. Humans were not weak. They were adaptable. They survived because they could. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to matter in a galaxy that had always underestimated them. Elara spoke again, her voice carrying across the metallic platform. "The Conquered believes humans are insignificant. They will try to remove you before you learn what you are capable of. But if you trust yourself, and if you trust each other, you can endure anything." But he could not deny the flicker of courage rising in his chest. He had survived disasters on Earth. He had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. He had endured. Perhaps that was the one constant in a world of uncertainty, the part of himself that refused to break no matter what came. Lyra squeezed his hand. "We start now," she said. "And we never look back." And as the alien princess and her daughter stood silently beside him, he understood the truth. This was only the beginning. The human felt the platform beneath him hum softly, a strange vibration that ran through his feet and up his spine. He took in his surroundings, trying to make sense of the place. Unlike the cramped city streets of Earth, Xyler's landscape stretched endlessly, full of metallic structures that seemed to float above the ground. Bridges connected towers that reached into the sky, and energy pulses ran along the edges of every surface, giving the world a quiet rhythm. Ships drifted above the city in orderly formations, far larger than any human craft, yet moving with elegance rather than aggression. Elara led him along a pathway that twisted and arched like the spine of some giant creature. Lyra's small hand held his, grounding him in a reality that was still impossible to believe. He stumbled several times, catching himself on the smooth surfaces as he tried to keep up with her quick, precise steps. "You will adapt faster than you think," Elara said without looking back. "Humans adjust. You already have shown resilience that surprises even me. I feel like I'm walking into a trap I can't even see." It rose in spirals, twisting into the sky with surfaces that shimmered like liquid metal. Energy flows traced patterns along the walls, casting moving shadows across the platform. Guards, tall and armored in smooth exosuits, watched silently as they passed, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. The human felt the weight of every gaze, as if the palace itself was aware of his presence and scrutinizing him. Inside, the palace was even more astonishing. Vast halls stretched endlessly, lit by soft, luminescent panels that changed color with the time of day. The air smelled faintly of ozone and flowers, a combination so alien that it made his head spin. Every surface gleamed, every line precise, yet the architecture felt alive, flowing with the rhythm of the city outside. Elara led him through corridors where courtiers and scientists paused to stare. Whispers followed them. He realized quickly that he was the subject of fascination, curiosity, and suspicion. It was clear from the looks on their faces. A human in the palace was not expected, and many did not approve of his presence. Finally, they arrived at a chamber at the top of the palace. It was wide, with a transparent floor that looked down on the city below. Light from the twin suns bathed the room, reflecting off the surfaces to create a shimmering aura. Elara turned to him, her expression serious. "You will stay here for now," she said. "It is secure, yet you will be observed. The conquered believes humans are fragile. They do not trust your species, and they certainly do not trust you. You must understand that your survival is seen as an anomaly, one that must be studied, controlled, or removed. Your instincts may keep you alive longer than anything else, but knowledge will be your shield. Humans think they are insignificant, but when the conquered underestimates them, they are dangerous." She looked back at him. "And you are dangerous, even if you do not know it yet." And yet the words felt true. Whatever humans were capable of, whatever he was capable of, the universe had never truly measured it. Over the next hours, he began the first lessons of life in the palace. Lyra was patient but firm, explaining the basics of Xylarian language and culture. The human found that he could understand far more quickly than she expected. Words, symbols, and concepts that had taken humans years to master could be grasped in hours. Even Elara paused occasionally, a faint smile crossing her face as she observed him absorb information at an extraordinary pace. "They learn too fast," she whispered to a nearby aide. "No species should adapt so quickly. But humans, they are different. If no one believed humans could survive, then the first human to prove them wrong could change everything." Despite the lessons, not all encounters were pleasant. Courtiers and scientists would enter the chamber to examine him, asking questions as if he were an experiment rather than a person. They tested his reactions, his memory, his strength, and his logic. He grew frustrated at first, angry at being treated like a specimen. But Lyra's presence reminded him that he was not alone. Her trust, her simple belief in his abilities, became a lifeline in a world where everyone else doubted him. "The conquered fears what they do not understand," Lyra said one evening as the twin suns dipped toward the horizon. "They do not know your limits because you have survived more than any of them could imagine. That is why they hate you, and that is why they will watch you." To live here, he would have to adapt to alien expectations, to navigate a society that viewed him with suspicion, and to prove, quietly and persistently, that humans were not insignificant. It was exhausting just to think about, yet a strange spark of determination grew inside him. He had endured disasters on Earth. He had faced enemies who underestimated him. This was no different, except the stakes were higher and the players far more dangerous. Days passed. His lessons continued, but he also observed the palace itself. The human city-sized ships were dwarfed by Xylarian vessels, yet he noticed patterns in their flight, weaknesses in their defensive systems, and the logic behind their architecture. His mind, trained in strategy and problem-solving, began to see opportunities where the aliens saw perfection. For the first time, he felt a strange confidence, an understanding that while he was outmatched in every physical sense, he could think in ways that the conquered did not expect. Elara noticed it too. She watched him work through simulations, offering strategies, testing his intuition. Her eyes narrowed with interest. "This human," she whispered to Lyra, "he learns, but more than that, he observes. He adapts in ways we cannot predict. Perhaps I was right to save him." Guards ran through corridors and a deep voice announced, "Alert! Unauthorized conquered surveillance detected near perimeter. Potential breach imminent. You must stay calm and follow instructions." Elara moved with purpose, issuing orders, while the human watched, absorbing everything. Though he was inexperienced in alien technology, he began to notice patterns, predicting where reinforcements would arrive and pointing out blind spots. Lyra's eyes widened. "He sees it," she whispered. "He already understands the weaknesses. Perhaps this human will do more than survive. Perhaps he will teach us something new." All the while, the human remained a puzzle, an enigma, yet slowly proving himself through thought, observation, and courage. By evening, he stood on the balcony of his chamber, looking out over the sprawling city. The twin suns bathed the world in gold and silver light, and ships drifted lazily in the sky. He had survived lessons, scrutiny, and fear. He had learned more in days than he ever imagined possible, and for the first time he felt a flicker of hope. Lyra appeared beside him silently. "You are doing well," she said. "Not because of strength, but because you think, you adapt, and you endure. That is what humans do. Never forget it." In a galaxy that underestimated him at every turn, he realized that survival was only the beginning. To thrive, he would need courage, intelligence, and patience. But perhaps, just perhaps, humans were exactly the kind of species the universe had not yet reckoned with. And somewhere in the shadows, the conquered watched, unaware that the human they had dismissed as weak was quietly learning, quietly adapting, and quietly preparing to change the game. The next day, the human was summoned to a large hall he had not seen before. It was the size of several city blocks, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadows, and walls lined with panels that glowed softly with data streams. Rows of beings from multiple worlds filled the space. Their appearances varied. Some had multiple limbs, some moved without legs, some glimmered with a metallic sheen. All of them were seated in a formal arrangement, observing him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright disdain. Elara walked beside him, her presence calm yet commanding. Lyra followed quietly, her hand brushing against his arm as if to remind him that he was not alone. The human felt a lump in his throat. He had survived many things on Earth, but he had never faced a crowd like this, all watching him, judging him, expecting him to fail. He remembered Lyra's words, "Humans endure." He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked to the center of the hall. A voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by the building itself. "This assembly is convened to examine the anomaly known as the human," it declared. "You stand here in defiance of probability, against all reason. Speak now, human. Explain your existence." "That is what humans do." One of the delegates, a tall figure with transparent skin that revealed flowing patterns of bioluminescent veins, spoke next. "You claim to survive by instinct, but instinct alone is not enough. You are fragile, unarmed, unprepared. Why should this assembly allow your continued existence? You study probability and assume weakness, but humans do not rely on probability. We act, we respond, we learn from failure. And when everything tells us we cannot continue, we do. That is why I am here, not because I am strong, not because I am powerful, but because I endure." That is a primitive justification. Strength, strategy, intelligence, these matter. Humans have none of these in proportion to the galaxy. You are nothing. When you dismiss us, That is your weakness, not ours." Red lights flashed along the walls, and a tremor ran beneath their feet. The human glanced toward the windows, or what passed for windows, and saw distant ships descending rapidly, moving faster than any craft he had ever seen. Panic spread across the assembly. The delegates began shouting instructions, issuing commands, activating defenses, yet chaos spread like wildfire. The conquered had underestimated this attack, and the hall became a place of confusion. Ilara stepped forward. "Stay calm," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This is a test. Observe, adapt, survive." He noticed patterns in their approach, gaps in their formation, and weaknesses in their defensive layout that the Zalarian commanders had overlooked. His mind raced. Strategy was instinct on Earth, and instincts did not fail him. "Look at the flanks," he said to Lyra, pointing to areas where defenses were thin. "They're moving too fast for standard interceptors. They will overwhelm if you follow your usual patterns. Redirect forces to the corners and use a layered approach. They expect linear defense. Break it." "He knows what he is doing." But Ilara intervened, silencing them with a gesture. The human suggestions were implemented, layer by layer, and slowly the tide of the attack shifted. Ships that had been cutting through defenses were caught in energy nets, forced to maneuver unpredictably. The human's instincts, strategy born from survival rather than formal training, outmatched the predictability of the attacker's patterns. Lyra watched him with growing awe. "He's changing the outcome," she whispered. By the end of the assault, the palace and surrounding city were battered but intact. The attackers retreated, confused and unable to adapt to the humans' unpredictable strategy. Silence fell over the hall, punctuated only by the hum of the palace systems and the soft groans of damaged infrastructure. The assembly was stunned. A murmur ran through the crowd. No human had ever survived such an encounter, let alone influenced the outcome. No human had ever challenged the conquered's assumptions with such clarity and effectiveness. The human stood in the center of the hall, breathing heavily but steady. "We survived," he said simply. "Not because we are the strongest, not because we are the fastest, but because we adapt. That is what humans do. Humans are underestimated because you refuse to see the full measure of their potential. This human has shown that even one human can influence events beyond expectation. Take note. There will be more, and they will not all be so simple." That night, as the human rested in his chamber, he thought about what had just happened. He realized that survival alone was not enough. Humans endured, yes, but they also had to act, to adapt, to make decisions that others would not consider. His mind replayed the events over and over, noticing patterns, opportunities, and potential improvements. He understood that each challenge, each threat, was an opportunity to demonstrate humanity's true strength. Lyra sat beside him, her small hand brushing his arm. "You think too much," she said with a faint smile. "But that is also why humans are dangerous. You do not accept limits. You see paths that others do not. Limits do not exist until someone breaks them. You must remain calm. You have survived their scrutiny before, and you can do so again. But remember this, your strength is not measured in combat or weapons. It is measured in your mind, your will, and your ability to endure." He closed his eyes, feeling exhaustion wash over him, but beneath it, a quiet determination grew. He would survive. He would endure. And perhaps he would teach the galaxy something it had never seen before. The twin sons of Xylar rose the next morning, casting golden light across the palace. From the balcony, the human watched the city below, ships moving in precise formation, guards patrolling the streets, courtiers whispering in hushed tones. He was still new to this world, still learning its ways, still considered an anomaly. But he also knew something profound. The galaxy had underestimated humans, and that underestimation would be its first mistake. Lyra appeared silently, standing beside him. "They watch you," she said softly. "Every move, every word, they think they understand, they do not. Not by fighting the way they expect, but by surviving, adapting, and proving that humans cannot be ignored. That is what humans do, and that is why you are still here." The conquered may have doubted him, may have tried to dismiss him, but he had survived, and that was only the beginning. And somewhere beyond the stars, forces moved, watching, waiting, unaware that a single human had begun to change the rules of the game. The human awoke to the quiet hum of the palace. Outside, the twin sons of Xylar were climbing the sky, casting long silver and gold reflections across the metallic surfaces. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the weight of the days that had passed, the lessons, the tribunal, the battle that had tested his instincts. He was no longer merely a visitor. He had become a subject of curiosity, fear, and slowly, respect. But he also knew the danger had not passed. The conquered had not forgotten him, and neither had the whispers of doubt that flowed through the palace halls. Lyra appeared at the doorway, her small frame carrying a quiet authority. "You slept well?" she asked, her voice calm yet commanding. The human nodded, though his thoughts were heavy. Lyra glanced at him, her golden eyes studying him with a strange mixture of concern and admiration. "The conquered is unsettled," she said. "They have begun discussing what to do about you. Some say you must be removed, others say you must be studied further. They do not understand that humans are different." "That doesn't mean just observing me anymore, does it?" Fear had always been a signal, not a cage. It reminded him what was at stake. "Then I need to be smarter," he said. "Not just survive, but anticipate. If they are going to move against me, I need to know their steps before they take them." Ilara called a private council, summoning the human to a chamber filled with light and data streams. She closed the doors behind them and gestured for him to sit. "You have shown remarkable skill," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You have survived scrutiny, influenced the battle, and demonstrated something none of the conquered expected. But there is a price for this." "You mean kill me?" Here it was layered with diplomacy, manipulation, and constant observation. Every move mattered, and one mistake could end him, but he also felt a strange excitement. For the first time, he was not merely reacting, he was planning, thinking ahead, learning faster than anyone expected. Lyra stepped closer. "You will not be alone," she said. "I will be with you. Together we can navigate the palace, its rules, and the conquered's expectations. But you must learn quickly. Trust alone will not protect you. Intelligence, strategy, and observation will." Lyra guided him through the palace's social hierarchy, teaching him the protocols, the subtle cues of authority, and the hidden alliances that ran beneath the surface. They practiced formal greetings, the etiquette of bowing and gesturing, and the reading of expressions that were far more subtle than any human nuance. He struggled at first, feeling clumsy and awkward, but Lyra's patience and quiet encouragement kept him moving forward. "You adapt quickly," she said after a long session. "But remember, adaptation is not just imitation. Humans are strongest when they remain themselves, even while navigating alien systems. Do not lose yourself trying to be them." To survive, he must learn their rules, but to thrive, he must use his own instincts, his own ingenuity. It was a delicate balance, but one he was beginning to grasp. As the day progressed, whispers of the human's presence spread through the palace. Courtiers who had once dismissed him now approached with cautious respect, though suspicion still lingered. Some offered advice, others tested him with questions designed to trip him up. Each interaction was a challenge, a chance to show that humans were not to be underestimated. And each time he observed, adapted, and responded, slowly gaining a reputation that was equal parts fascination and fear. By evening, a message arrived from the conquered itself. A delegation of emissaries would arrive the next day, formally to examine the human but in reality to decide his fate. The palace was tense, preparing for their arrival. Ilara summoned him and Lyra to the observation balcony. "They will test you," Ilara said. "Not with words, but with subtle pressure. They will try to intimidate, manipulate, and unsettle. They will look for any weakness. If they find one, they will exploit it. Together, we will survive and show them that humans cannot be dismissed." They did not speak initially, simply observing, taking in every detail, measuring the human's reactions, the way he carried himself, the smallest gestures of fear or confidence. One emissary stepped forward, its voice resonating with authority. "Human," it said, "you stand here against the will of the conquered. You exist where you should not. Explain why we should not remove you." Another emissary, covered in a reflective metallic exoskeleton, spoke next. "You speak boldly, but words are meaningless. Actions define strength. Can you survive when the universe moves against you? If you truly wish to test me further, I am ready. But remember, humans are dangerous not because we seek to dominate, but because we endure where others fail." He realized then that the conquered's greatest mistake was underestimating the human capacity for thought, strategy, and endurance. Suddenly, an alert sounded. Sensors detected anomalies in the surrounding space, signs of a potential threat approaching the palace. The emissaries stiffened, immediately issuing commands. Chaos threatened to erupt, but the human's instincts kicked in. He studied the data, noticed gaps in the defensive protocols, and suggested rapid adjustments. His instructions were precise, logical, and unexpected. The palace defense systems responded effectively, neutralizing the threat before it could reach the outer walls. The emissaries stared, shocked. "How?" one of them whispered. "This human, he anticipates patterns, adapts faster than our protocols. The conquered does not yet understand the danger or the power of your species." He was no longer merely an anomaly. He was a living example of what humans could accomplish, even when underestimated. Lyra stood beside him, her small hand brushing against his arm. "You see," she said, "even in a world that fears and doubts you, you can endure, you can change perceptions. Humans are not weak. We survive, we adapt, and we influence the world without even trying to dominate it." They relied on will, intelligence, and the unyielding determination to endure. That night, as the human lay in his chamber, he reflected on the lessons of the day. He had faced scrutiny, intimidation, and a direct threat from forces more advanced than anything on Earth. And he had survived, not by strength, but by using what made humans unique: adaptability, ingenuity, and perseverance. He realized that every challenge he faced, every obstacle placed by the conquered, was not just a threat, but an opportunity to show that humans could endure and even thrive where others would fail. Elara and Lyra watched him from the doorway, silent but vigilant. They knew the coming days would bring more tests, more scrutiny, and perhaps even more danger. But they also knew this human had proven himself in ways few could understand. He was not just a survivor. He was a reminder to the galaxy that humans were underestimated at their own peril. And somewhere in the shadows of the conquered, forces whispered and plotted, unaware that the human they dismissed as fragile and insignificant had already begun to change the rules of the game. The twin suns rose over Xylar, bathing the palace in gold and silver light. The human stood on the balcony once more, feeling the energy of the city around him. Ships moved through the sky with precision, guards patrolled the streets below, and courtiers whispered in the corridors. He had learned much about this world, its rules, its dangers, its strengths, but the conquered's gaze was still upon him. Today, the final test would begin. Elara appeared beside him, her presence calm yet commanding. "The emissaries will return," she said. "This time they bring representatives from every sector of the conquered. They will not merely observe. They intend to judge you. If they find you unfit, they may take action against you permanently." "Then I will not disappoint," he said quietly. "Not by fighting as they expect, but by showing them who humans really are." Every being present exuded authority and suspicion. The human felt the weight of their gaze, the judgment of countless worlds pressing down on him, yet he did not falter. He remembered what Lyra and Elara had taught him. He would endure, he would adapt, he would prove humanity's worth. The chief emissary, a towering figure with crystalline skin that shimmered with 1,000 colors, stepped forward. "Human," it intoned, "you stand before the conquered once again. Your previous actions were noted, yet this assembly requires proof. You claim humanity endures. You claim humans are not weak. Demonstrate this now or face judgment." "You want proof," he said, his voice steady. "I will show it, not by aggression, not by domination, but by understanding, adaptation, and survival. Humanity does not conquer by force alone. We survive, we learn, and we improve." The human's calm, confident reasoning unsettled those who had expected fear, confusion, or panic. Suddenly, an alert echoed through the hall. Sensors detected a massive disturbance near the planetary orbit, a fleet approaching at speeds faster than any conventional ships of the conquered. Panic erupted among the emissaries and their guards. The human's eyes widened as he studied the data. The fleet's trajectory was precise, but its strategy predictable. It was a coordinated attack designed to force the palace into chaos, testing every defense simultaneously. He stepped forward, addressing both Elara and Lyra. "They expect linear defenses. They rely on brute force and predictability. If we redirect energy grids, rotate our shields in patterns they don't anticipate, and use the decoy formations here and here, we can neutralize their assault before they breach the palace. They don't expect strategy based on observation. They rely on overwhelming strength. We must trust them again." Energy shields rotated at angles the attackers could not anticipate, countermeasures triggered in unpredictable sequences, and decoy formations drew the fleet into traps. The battle raged, yet the human remained composed. He observed patterns, predicted movements, and adapted strategies in real time. Each decision was precise, every action measured. Slowly, the tide of the battle shifted. The fleet, once threatening to overwhelm, faltered under tactics it could not anticipate. The emissaries in the hall were stunned. "How?" one whispered. "This human, he thinks differently. Faster than any protocol, faster than any simulation. He adapts in ways no species in the conquered has ever demonstrated. Your mind, your instincts, they are beginning to understand." The conquered emissaries, once confident in their authority, now stood in shocked silence. The human had demonstrated what words alone could not convey. Humans were not weak, not fragile, not insignificant. They were capable of thinking, adapting, and surviving in ways that no one had anticipated. Finally, the hall fell silent. The human stood at the center, exhausted but resolute. He met the gaze of the emissaries, then turned to Elara and Lyra. "We survived," he said simply. "Not because we are strongest, but because we endure, we adapt, and we learn. That is humanity. Your species holds potential far beyond what we calculated. You have shown them what humans are. This is only the beginning, but it is a beginning that will change the galaxy's perception." But he had learned something profound. Humans were underestimated not because they were weak, but because their strength came in forms that others could not measure. Endurance, ingenuity, adaptation, these were qualities that no conventional force could predict or control. Over the following days, the palace shifted subtly. Courtiers and scientists who had once doubted him now sought his counsel. Some still feared him, but even their caution acknowledged his capability. Humans were no longer invisible, no longer dismissed. They had begun to claim a place in the galaxy, not through force, but through perseverance and intellect. One evening, the humans stood once again on the balcony with Lyra and Elara. The city below glimmered under the light of the twin suns, the calm after the storm settling across the metallic streets. Ships moved in disciplined formations, and the palace hummed with activity. "You've changed things," Lyra said softly, her gaze fixed on him. "They will not see humans the same way again. The galaxy will keep testing us, trying to push boundaries, trying to see if we are truly capable. But humans, we endure, and we adapt. And it will be recognized." The twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the palace and the city below. The human felt a quiet determination. He had faced scrutiny, battle, and political intrigue, and he had survived. The conquered had underestimated humans, but that mistake would not be repeated. The galaxy would learn what humans were capable of, not through fear or aggression, but through endurance, intelligence, and adaptation. Lyra stood beside him, her small hand resting on his arm. "Humans survive," she said softly, "and now they will be watched with respect. Not because we conquer," he said, "but because we endure, we adapt, and we rise to meet challenges no one else can. That is what makes us human. It is only the first step, but it is a step the universe will remember." One human had adapted when none expected it, and that human, standing quietly in a palace far from Earth, had begun to change the way the galaxy would see humanity forever. The human exhaled, a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and resolve washing over him. He had endured, he had adapted, and he had survived. The galaxy had begun to learn the truth about humans, and this was only the beginning. And for the first time he felt it, hope, purpose, and the quiet power of being underestimated by the universe, and rising anyway.